They said they're building the biggest refinery in the world. I say they're hiding a massacre. If America strikes, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet.
In the heart of Lagos, Nigeria, a massive structure rises from the ground like a modern steel city, the Dangote refinery. It is not just a building, it's a symbol of what Africa can become when it decides to control its own destiny. This refinery already refines 650,000 barrels of crude oil every day, making it the largest single-train refinery in the entire world. But what makes this story truly incredible is that Aliko Dangote, Africa's richest man, has announced plans to double its size to a mind-blowing 1.4 million barrels per day. When that happens, Nigeria will own the largest refinery on Earth, bigger than anything in India, China, or the United States. For many years, Nigeria exported crude oil cheaply and then bought back petrol, diesel, and jet fuel at very high prices. The country had oil but still faced fuel shortages. It was a cycle of dependence, a modern version of economic slavery. The Dangote refinery changes everything. It means Nigeria can refine its own oil, create its own jobs, and build its own wealth. For the first time, Africa's biggest nation will not need to rely on foreign refineries. It can produce, supply, and even export refined products to the rest of West Africa. This refinery is not just about energy, it's about independence. It's about showing that Africa no longer has to beg for development. It can build it with its own hands. Every tower, every pipe, every flame at the Dangote refinery represents a broken chain, the end of dependency that has kept African nations poor for generations. Nigeria is not just making fuel, it's making history. Then, just as Nigeria was celebrating this new age of power and pride, something shocking happened. On November 1, 2025, former US President Donald Trump posted a message on his platform, Truth Social, that sent waves across Africa. He claimed that Nigeria was committing a Christian genocide. He declared that the United States would cut all aid and warned that his government, which he now calls the Department of War, was preparing for military action. And then he used words that shocked the world. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet. Those words, fast, vicious, and sweet, were not the words of a peacekeeper. They were the words of a man describing violence as if it were pleasure. Many asked, why now? Why threaten Nigeria, a country that has faced religious tensions for years, only after it built the biggest refinery in the world? For decades, when Nigeria was poor and dependent, no American president talked about bombing it. But now, when it starts to rise, when it begins to control its own oil, suddenly there is a crisis that demands Western intervention. This timing is not a coincidence, it's a pattern. It looks less like a humanitarian mission and more like a warning, a way to remind Africa that it cannot rise without permission. Trump's statement created panic, anger, and confusion. Was this really about protecting Christians, or was it about protecting the global oil contracts that keep Africa dependent on the West? To understand the truth, we must look deeper than Trump's words. The violence in Nigeria did not start yesterday. Groups like Boko Haram have been terrorizing communities since 2009. They have killed thousands of innocent people, both Christians and Muslims. According to a Nigerian human rights lawyer, Bolama Bukati, who has studied the data for years, Boko Haram has attacked 83 churches, but also 72 mosques. They have killed over 2,000 Muslim worshippers and around 1,500 Christians. These numbers prove that Boko Haram is not fighting a religious war. They are terrorists who attack everyone, spreading chaos and fear. Yet Trump's message turned this complex reality into a simple headline: Christian genocide. It's a story that sounds emotional, easy to believe, but hides the truth. It divides Nigerians by religion when in fact both Muslims and Christians are suffering together. The truth is, Nigeria's violence is not about faith. It's about poverty, weak governance, land conflicts, and extremism. These are problems that bombs cannot fix. When Western leaders and media describe Nigeria's crisis as Muslims killing Christians, they ignore the full picture. And worse, they give Boko Haram exactly what it wants: division. Because when Christians and Muslims see each other as enemies, the terrorists win. But when Nigerians unite, the terrorists lose power. Trump's framing does not protect anyone. It only breaks the fragile unity that Nigeria needs most right now. If you look back at history, you start to see a strange and painful pattern. A pattern that repeats again and again. Every time an African or Middle Eastern nation begins to take control of its own resources, something happens. Suddenly, there's talk of a crisis. Suddenly, the world's most powerful countries want to intervene. They always say it's for peace or human rights, but somehow the result is always the same. The country loses its independence and its resources fall back into foreign hands. It happened in Libya, when Muammar Gaddafi wanted to create a single African currency backed by gold. That idea could have made Africa rich and free from the US dollar. But soon after, NATO bombed Libya to protect civilians. Gaddafi was killed, and Libya fell into chaos. It happened in Iraq, when Saddam Hussein suggested selling oil in euros instead of dollars. Within years, the US invaded Iraq, claiming there were weapons of mass destruction which were never found. The same story unfolded in Afghanistan, Syria, and now the same words are being spoken about Nigeria. Nigeria was never a threat when it was selling crude oil and buying back petrol. But now, after building the largest refinery in the world, it has suddenly become dangerous. It's almost like the moment Africa tries to stand on its own feet, someone steps in to knock it down. The excuse changes. Sometimes it's terrorism, sometimes it's religion, sometimes it's democracy. But the real reason stays the same: control. Control of oil, gas, gold, markets, and power. And this is why Nigeria must look carefully at history. Because once you see the pattern, you realize this is not about saving lives. It's about saving systems of power that depend on Africa staying weak. In the middle of West Africa, a young man stood up and said no. His name is Ibrahim Traoré, the 34-year-old leader of Burkina Faso. When he came to power, many thought he would continue the same old story: foreign troops, Western control, endless promises of help. But instead, Traoré did something that shocked the world. He expelled all French soldiers from his country. No delay, no half measures, just a clear and fearless message: we can protect our own land. For decades, France kept military bases in its former colonies, claiming to fight terrorism. But people started to see the truth. The terrorists remained, poverty continued, and France still controlled the region's resources. Traoré decided enough was enough. He told his people that true independence means control, not just over your flag or your anthem, but over your economy, your army, and your future. But Traoré was not reckless. He didn't isolate his country. He built new partnerships with Russia for security, with China for infrastructure, with Turkey for technology, with the Gulf for funding, but always on Burkina Faso's terms. He refused to let any foreign army set up a permanent base. He also rejected the IMF's orders to cut spending on education and healthcare. He said, "We will not destroy our people just to please creditors." His country has faced challenges, inflation, sanctions, and threats, but the people support him because they see something new: dignity. Traoré proved that an African nation can say no to powerful countries and still survive. For Nigeria, his story is a living lesson. If tiny Burkina Faso can stand alone, imagine what a giant like Nigeria can do with oil, industry, and 200 million citizens. Traoré's courage is the blueprint for Africa's freedom. Here is one of the oldest tricks in history: divide and rule. When outsiders want to control a people, they don't always use guns. Sometimes they use beliefs. Religion in Africa has often been turned into a weapon. Centuries ago, Islam came with traders, and Christianity came with colonizers. Both faiths brought deep spiritual truths, but they were also used to divide Africans from each other. Missionaries told Africans to focus on heaven, while their land and gold were taken on earth. Later, colonial rulers built maps, borders, and laws that split tribes, faiths, and families apart. And now in the 21st century, the same tool is being used again. When Trump says Christian genocide, he is not protecting faith, he is weaponizing it. By making Nigerians see each other as enemies, he weakens them, because when Christians fight Muslims, no one notices who controls the oil. When people argue about religion, no one asks who profits from the conflict. Nigeria's real strength is its unity. Its people, Christians, Muslims, and traditional believers, share the same streets, the same dreams, and the same hopes for peace. But if they let outsiders use religion to divide them, then everything they've built will crumble. There's an African proverb that says, "When two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers." In Nigeria, the elephants are not Christians and Muslims, the elephants are foreign powers, and the people are the grass beneath their feet. The Dangote refinery shows what Nigerians can achieve together. But the more united they become, the more the world will try to divide them. The only way to win this battle is not with weapons, but with wisdom, by remembering that faith should heal, not divide. Something powerful is happening across Africa, something that cannot be stopped by borders or governments. It's a new awakening, a rising wave of young Africans who see through the lies that their parents were forced to believe. They have watched the world repeat the same pattern for decades. Africa rises and someone tries to pull it down. But now this generation is connected. They have the internet. They see the truth. They talk to each other across countries and languages. They know that what happens in Nigeria affects Burkina Faso, Mali, Ghana, and Kenya. When young people in Africa look at Ibrahim Traoré, they don't just see a president, they see themselves. A leader who is young, bold, and unafraid. Someone who doesn't bow to foreign powers. They share his speeches, his words, his courage. They know that when he says we do not ask permission to be free, he speaks for all of them. From Mali to Niger, from Ghana to Tanzania, Africans are beginning to realize that their future will not be built by outsiders. It will be built by their own hands. The old model of dependency, where leaders waited for Western loans and approval, is dying. A new era of self-belief is rising. It's not just about politics, it's about pride, identity, and unity. This Pan-African awakening is not happening through governments, it's happening through the people. Through students, workers, farmers, and creators who finally understand one truth: Africa doesn't need saving, it needs freedom. Africa is the richest continent in the world, but also the poorest. It sounds impossible, but it's true. The reason is simple: Africa's wealth leaves Africa. For centuries, the continent has exported raw materials, gold, oil, cocoa, cotton, and imported finished products. This means Africa sells what it has for cheap and buys back what it needs for 10 times the price. Think about it. Africa sends out gold and buys back jewelry. It exports cocoa and imports chocolate. It sells cotton and buys clothes. It pumps oil and buys petrol. The profit, the jobs, the industries all stay abroad. The continent remains poor even while the world grows rich from its resources. The Dangote refinery is a direct answer to that problem. It keeps the wealth where it belongs, in Africa. It refines oil inside Nigeria. It creates Nigerian jobs. It builds Nigerian industry. It's not just an oil refinery, it's a revolution in steel and fire. This is what Western powers fear, an Africa that adds value to its own resources. Because when Africa starts refining, building, and manufacturing for itself, it no longer depends on others. It becomes a competitor. It becomes powerful. The truth is, Africa's poverty is not natural. It's engineered. The system was built to keep it that way. But projects like Dangote's refinery are breaking the system piece by piece. The moment Africa stops exporting its wealth and starts transforming it, the global balance of power changes forever. That is why this refinery matters. That is why Nigeria's success is not just Nigeria's, it's Africa's victory. Right now, Africa stands at a crossroads. 2 paths lie ahead, one of freedom and one of fear. The first path is hard but beautiful. It leads to sovereignty, to African nations that control their own oil, gold, and industries. It leads to countries that make their own rules, build their own products, and write their own stories. It's the path that Nigeria and Burkina Faso are beginning to walk. It's the path of independence and dignity. But the second path is the one Africa has walked for too long. It's the path of dependency, where every crisis becomes an excuse for foreign troops to land, for loans to arrive with hidden chains, for leaders to trade freedom for comfort. It's the path of countries that look rich in resources, but live poor in reality. It's the path that turns heroes into puppets and nations into markets. When Donald Trump threatened to bomb Nigeria, it wasn't just a political message. The question wasn't, will America attack? The real question was, will Nigeria bow? Because if Nigeria, Africa's largest economy and most powerful nation, gives in, the message to every other African country is clear: do not try to be independent. But if Nigeria stands firm, completes the Dangote expansion, and refuses to be bullied, then it proves something revolutionary, that Africa can rise without permission. The stakes could not be higher. This is not only about oil or politics, it's about the destiny of a continent. Will Africa continue to be a supplier of raw materials and a buyer of finished goods, or will it become the producer, the refiner, the creator of its own wealth? The answer will decide whether this century belongs to Africa, or whether history repeats itself once more. When you step back and connect all the dots, everything becomes clear. This is not new. The story of Africa's rise and the world's reaction to it has been repeating for decades. Each time a nation decides to control its own resources, the same thing happens. First comes praise, then concern, then chaos. And after the chaos, control returns to the same hands as before. Libya tried to create its own African currency and was bombed. Iraq tried to sell oil in euros and was invaded. Afghanistan became a battlefield under the name of freedom. Now Nigeria builds the world's biggest refinery, and suddenly the world talks of Christian genocide and intervention. Can all this really be a coincidence? No. It's a pattern, a playbook written long ago. A country dares to rise, or a crisis is created, intervention follows, and the dream dies. It's how control is maintained without calling it colonization. It's how empires survive in a world that claims to be free. But something is different this time. The pattern has been exposed. Millions of Africans can now see it. They talk, they share, they connect. Information cannot be hidden anymore. People have learned that help often comes with hidden strings, and peacekeeping can mean occupation. The world can no longer use old lies on a generation that knows how to find the truth. The message is simple but powerful. The pattern is clear, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. Now Nigeria stands before a decision that will shape not just its future, but the future of the entire African continent. The choice is not between Christians and Muslims, not between war and peace, not even between the West and the East. The real choice is between submission and sovereignty, between dependence and dignity. If Nigeria allows outside powers to use its internal conflicts as an excuse to interfere, then it risks losing everything it has worked for: the Dangote refinery, industrial independence, and the dream of controlling its own destiny. But if Nigeria stands firm, resists pressure, and builds unity among its people, it could change the course of African history forever. Burkina Faso has already shown the world that sovereignty is possible. Even under sanctions, isolation, and hardship, it survives with dignity. If a small landlocked nation can stand up to empires, imagine what a giant like Nigeria can do with its wealth, people, and power. The Dangote refinery is not just a factory, it's a symbol of courage. It's proof that Africa can build, refine, and lead. This is not just Nigeria's fight, it is Africa's fight. The decision Nigeria makes now will echo in every African capital, from Accra to Addis Ababa, from Nairobi to Dakar. If Nigeria bows, Africa breaks. But if Nigeria stands tall, Africa rises. And so here we are at the edge of history, where one nation's decision will define a generation. The world is watching. Some are waiting for Nigeria to fail, to prove that Africa cannot handle freedom. Others are hoping, praying that this time the story will be different, that this time Africa will not collapse under pressure but rise above it. The Dangote refinery still stands tall, shining like a fortress of steel and fire. It represents every African dream that was once dismissed as impossible. And Ibrahim Traoré stands in Burkina Faso as living proof that sovereignty is possible, that even the smallest nation can say no to empire and survive. This is not just about oil or politics anymore. It's about identity, about a continent deciding who it really is. For centuries, Africa was told that it could not survive without help, but help often came with chains. Now the chains are visible, and the question is simple: will Africa wear them again? The answer depends on what Nigeria does next. If it continues building, refining, and uniting, then this moment becomes a turning point, the birth of a new Africa that controls its wealth, tells its own stories, and stands equal with the world. But if it gives in, if it allows fear and division to take over, then history will repeat itself once more. The world is waiting, the people are watching, and the truth is now too loud to silence. Africa stands at a crossroads. One path leads back to dependency, the other forward to destiny. And somewhere in the heart of that struggle, the voice of Ibrahim Traoré echoes, "We do not ask permission to be free."
Atẹ́gùn kò ráyè wọnú ọpọlọ mi. Ó ṣe ń lò fi sùn. Tí o bá fẹ́ sùn lálẹ́, èèyàn lè dé. Kátẹ́gùn bá wọlé sínú àwùjẹ èèyàn débi tí èèyàn máa block. Tó bá dé yẹ pé ṣe lè fẹ́ lò jáde náà, ó ṣe lò jáde. Bó dẹ̀ ṣe wà, èèyàn lè lò lásìkò winter, èèyàn lè lò lásìkò summer. Owó pọ́kú ni mo tà, mo ní kọ́lọ́kọ́lọ́. Bó dẹ̀ tún wá ní àwọn another design lóríṣiríṣi fìlà ló wà. Ṣé rí eléyìí náà sì? Mo ní kọ́lọ́kọ́lọ́ ẹ̀ lóríṣiríṣi. Fìlà yìí náà dé ó ṣe kíni? Ó fine dáadáa, tẹ́ bá gbọ́ pé ó gbà sí ó mú yes. Kò sí àṣàdànù nínú gbogbo àwọn káàpù mi. Kò sí èèyàn mi ní lè dé sórí ẹ̀. Mo bí bá lè dé sórí ẹ̀ ní kí n fi wọ̀nyí. Mi ìdẹ ló small cap mi sísàlẹ̀ débi tí màá ní kí n ṣe irú mi kí n fi wọ̀nyí. Bó ṣe wà yìí ó fine, kọ́lọ́kọ́lọ́ ẹ̀ wà. Ẹ tún wo eléyìí bó ṣe rí. Gbogbo àwọn fìlà yìí ló ṣe lò lásìkò tútù. Ẹ wo bẹ́lẹ̀ ṣe dàbí pé ṣe lẹ́wé scarf. Láìwé scarf, ẹ wo bó ṣe rí. Ẹ̀ẹ́dínwó ẹ bá lò. Kọ́lọ́kọ́lọ́ eléyìí náà wà. Mo ní kọ́lọ́kọ́lọ́ ẹ̀ lóríṣiríṣi. Òun ló wà. Black kẹ̀dẹ̀ nìyí kò kí ń select aṣọ èyí tẹ́ bá fẹ́ ẹ kàn síbi. Bákan náà díjà ó máa flush gbogbo system yìí á bá yín bọ́ọ̀lù gbogbo fat yìí ṣẹ́rí díjà tẹ́ ẹ̀ wò yìí tí bá sọ fún yín wípé ó kọjá bẹ́ẹ̀ ó gbá ski ó mú yes ẹ trust me díjà tẹ́ ẹ̀ wò lọ́wọ́ mi ó gbá ski dáadáa bákan náà eléyìí tẹ́ ẹ̀ wò yìí ni ó pè ní ti diabetes fún gbogbo èèyàn tó bá ní diabetes tí diabetes yẹn bá ti pẹ́ lára yín méjì ẹ̀ lẹ́ máa lò bọ̀ tó bá yẹ pé kò tí pẹ́ lára yín ẹyọ̀kan ẹ ti tó bákan náà ti gẹ̀dígẹ̀dí gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ kí lè lọ toilet ẹlòmíà lọ toilet by 30 minutes 1 hour ó sì wà ní toilet tó bá fagídí push tó bá fagídí gbin nídà ti fagídí gbin mọ́ eléyìí sì tẹ́ bá ti lò á bá yín kó gbogbo jẹ̀dí yẹn síta fún ara ẹ̀ báyìí ló máa jáde lára yín tẹ́ bá jìnnà sí toilet gan ẹ bá ṣe kíni ẹ bá gbẹ̀sọ̀ gbogbo lé so ó confirm ó da bákan náà gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá fẹ́ ra ọṣẹ dúdú osùn ó wà ọṣẹ túrà ó wà rub ó wà àbólíkì ó wà àwọn wig lóríṣiríṣi gbogbo ẹ̀ ló wà àwọn expression tẹ́lẹ̀ fi ṣe braid lóríṣiríṣi designer gbogbo ẹ̀ ló wà ní Lady K African Store ẹ lọ sórí Google ẹ lọ wo location shop wa bẹ́ẹ̀ tẹ́ bá ti type Lady K African Store àádà lórí Google map ni o àbí lórí nọ́mbà Google ó máa gbé store Lady K African Store wa bákan náà bread Agege wà fún èyí tẹ́ wà ní RBT èyí tẹ́ bá wà RBT bread Agege tó fine dáadáa both the slice one àti tí o ṣe slice ẹ̀ ó wà very fine delicious bread ó wà epo pupa ó wà àwọn ẹja gbígbẹ àwọn ẹja yẹn dùn tẹgọdí ẹ tẹ́ bá gbọ́ pé ó kàn dùn àwọn ẹja yẹn fine ó lọ nínú ẹ̀fọ́ ó lọ nínú ẹ̀gúsí bó ní tẹlifísì ọ̀gbọ̀nọ̀ gbogbo ẹ̀ ló wà lọ́dọ̀ Lady K so èyí tẹ́ bá fẹ́ ra àwọn ẹja gbígbẹ ọdún ló bọ̀ ìsìn yìí ẹnì kan tẹ́ bá wà báyìí tẹ́ bá yí sẹ́ ìdí ẹ mọ̀ pé yes ẹ ti ra ẹja tẹ́ bá fi ṣebẹ̀ ọdún sílé ẹ ti ra epo ẹ ti ra sẹ̀mọ́ ẹ ti ra tomatoes ẹ ti ra magidon chicken ẹ ti ra gbogbo tẹ́ bá lò láti fi ṣe oúnjẹ ọdún ẹ mọ̀ pé ẹ ti rà sílé ẹ mọ̀ pé gbogbo ẹ ti ṣe kí ni ó ti wà lákọ so ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá ní ìdíwọ́ ẹ pè mí bó dẹ̀ jáwọ́ expression náà ní tẹ́lẹ̀ fi ṣe irú yín lóríṣiríṣi kò síbi tí Lady K ò kí ṣìpọ̀ jẹ̀ sí gbogbo ọ̀nà ló gba Lady K bákan náà èyí tẹ́ bá wá ní ìdàwọ̀ aṣọ ẹ̀wọ̀n ọdún yóò yẹ tẹ́ bá gbọ́ wípé ọdún yóò yẹ bí o ṣe kò gbà owó lọ́wọ́ aṣọ yìí ṣe tí láwọn búbù yìí ẹ lè wọ́ sórí English lásìkò òtútù báyìí ẹ lè lọ sórí English ẹ dẹ̀ tún lè wọ́ tí ó bá tún sí òtútù ẹ wọ àwọn búbù wọ̀nyí owó pákúpákú ni mo tà wọ́n ọdún yóò yẹ ẹ wo lè báyìí sí ó tún ní side pocket ó ní front pocket kàrí méjì ẹ wo ẹ bó ṣe fine owó pákúpákú ni mo tà wọ́n aṣọ wọ̀nyí mo ní wọn lóríṣiríṣi bẹ́ẹ̀ ni oríṣiríṣi ẹ̀ ló wà mo máa ń kó ọbọ̀ ta ni tó bá ti píkì àwọn eléyìí tán sí àtúkọ̀ àwọn mi wà mo ní wọn ní kọ́lọ́kọ́lọ́ lóríṣiríṣi ẹ̀yin mọ́mì mi ẹ̀yin dádì mi ojú òní tí ẹ̀ nídìí kan ṣáyé yín ọdún ayọ̀ la máa ṣe ẹ pè mí kí tètè báyìí sẹ́ẹ̀dì aṣọ ọdún yín ẹ tẹ̀ tún wá wo eléyìí ẹ wò wọn aṣọ ìfàì aṣọ yìí ó gbẹ gbogbo ẹ̀ tí ẹ ní gbogbo ẹ̀ ní gbogbo ẹ̀ ló ṣe kí ni ló mú yes owó nìyí ó dẹ̀ ní gèlè tó tóbi tẹ́bi lè wé sí so àwọn aṣọ yìí wà ní oríṣiríṣi lọ́lọ́kọ̀ òjọ̀kan èyí tẹ́ bá ti fẹ́ èyí ṣàpèlè Lady K ọdún yóò yọ ọdún ayọ̀ la máa ṣe ẹ wò sàlẹ̀ lè tiẹ̀ ẹ wo bísàlẹ̀ tiẹ̀ tún ṣe rí ẹ wo design ẹ̀ ó fà ìgan design tẹ́ ẹ wò yẹn ó tún ní ìhò ó ní ìwò design tẹ́ ẹ wò yẹn so àwọn aṣọ yẹn wà lóríṣiríṣi tó bá dẹ̀ jẹ́ wípé ọwọ́ àdìrẹ náà lẹ bá fẹ́ àwọn àdìrẹ wà tí mi ò tiẹ̀ kó wọn sí bíbáyìí tó wà nínú store lọ ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá nídìí wọ̀nyẹn ṣáà ti pè mí àjọ ṣe fídíò call máa fi ọwọ́ aṣọ yẹn wọ̀nyí ẹ select tẹ́ bá fẹ́ ṣe lásìkò ṣe tètè place order yìí máa lè tètè bá yín sẹ́ẹ̀dẹ̀ á lè débẹ̀ ká tó ṣe ọdún ẹni tètè bá ti fẹ́ rà sí ẹ tètè order máa lè bá yín sẹ́ẹ̀dẹ̀ ó tẹ̀yẹ kí n ṣe máa faṣọ wọ̀nyí tó bá lè jẹ́ wípé àwọn eléyìí lè bá fẹ́ báàgì lè bá fẹ́ báàgì wà ilé wọ lásìkò tútù yìí ó lọ fún tútù yìí tó bá lè jẹ́ pé àwọn lace toppings with Ankara náà ní lóríṣiríṣi gbogbo ẹ̀ ló wà ní store Lady K ẹ̀yin dádì mi náà tẹ́lẹ̀ di bùbá àti ṣòkòtò ti wà dáadáa lóríṣiríṣi fẹ́yìn dádì mo láwọn tó kóṣẹ́ sí mo láwọn tí wọ́n kóṣẹ́ sí èyí tẹ́yìn bá ṣàtìfẹ́ ẹ pé Lady K ìfẹ́ olúwa máa bá yín sẹ́ẹ̀dì ẹ̀ kò sí country tí mi ò sẹ́ẹ̀dì ọjà sí tó bá dẹ̀ jẹ́ àwọn wíìgì náà lẹ́ bá fẹ́ tó bá jẹ́ àwọn jewelries ẹ pè mí àjọ ṣe fídíò call máa fi wọ̀nyí báyẹn máa rí ebi ó tajà èpè ẹlẹ́dàá mi ò ní jẹ́ ọjà tí màá tà tí ẹlẹ́dàá yìí máa ṣépè Ọlọ́run ò ní jẹ́ kí bá wọn tà bí ò ní gbowó ìbànújẹ́ láyé bí so gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá ní ìdáwọ́ nǹkan wọ̀nyí ẹjọ́ ẹ pele dike ìfẹ́ Olúwa ṣó bákan náà gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá tún wá fẹ́ èwo lókùtà ti polówó spiritual items ẹ wo ọdún lọ sópin ṣẹ́ni tọ́dún bá ti parí báyìí oríṣiríṣi ìṣẹ̀lẹ̀ ló máa ń ṣẹlẹ̀ ẹ̀yin bọ́bì mi ẹ̀yin dádì mi ẹ dira fúnra yín ẹ dì fún àwọn ọmọ yín as a spiritual person oríṣiríṣi lolúwẹ̀ rí tolúwẹ̀ gbọ́ oríṣiríṣi nǹkan ló ṣẹlẹ̀ sí àwọn èèyàn tó ń pè tolúwẹ̀ gbọ́ tó sì jẹ́ pé èmi fi wọ́n kẹ́kọ̀ọ́ lójoojúmọ́ mo dẹ̀ máa ń sọ fún àwọn tó bá mọ̀ mí wípé ẹ dira ẹ má wúra yín nírọ́ ibi kò ní kọ lẹ́tà pé àbò bọ̀ wá bẹ́ẹ̀ lálejò kọ́ ló bá jẹ́ kí ibi bá wa lálejò kọ́ ló bá jẹ́ kí ìṣẹ̀dá wa gbà bọ̀dẹ̀ kọ́ ló bá jẹ́ ká fi ara gba ọ̀tá ayé ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ àwọn tó ní ogun lọ́jọ́ ti tòní kì í ṣe ogun àfọwọ́fà o wọ́n fi ara gba ọ̀tá ọlọ́ta ni o tí èèyàn bá ti dira ẹ̀ ó ní fara gba ọ̀tá ọlọ́ta that is why tó fi jẹ́ wípé èèyàn gbọ́dọ̀ máa wẹ àwọn iṣẹ́ ìṣẹ́gun lẹ́ẹ̀kọ̀ọ̀kan èèyàn gbọ́dọ̀ máa lo cleanser ìṣẹ́gun lẹ́ẹ̀kọ̀ọ̀kan kò ẹ̀ṣẹ̀ dìgbà tí gbogbo kíní bá ti wá páìlì ìjọ ságọ́ ara tó bá ti wá di ńlá tán lèyàn ṣẹ̀ṣẹ̀ máa sá kíjokíjo bò wọ́ṣẹ̀ arọ́bí bò wọ́ṣẹ̀ ìyọ́nú bò wọ́ṣẹ̀ ìtúwọ̀ àwọn àgbà bò wọ́ṣẹ̀ òde bò wọ́ṣẹ̀ ìtúsílẹ̀ no èèyàn gbọ́dọ̀ máa lo gbogbo àwọn òkò ìsára owó làwọn àgbà náà ṣe máa ń pa lówe wípé ọlọ́gbọ́n èèyàn máa ń pọnmi lẹ́dọ̀ọ́gbẹ́ ni ẹ̀yin ìyá mi ẹ̀yin bàbá mi pápá ìyá bí amọ ẹ dira fún àwọn ọmọ yìí ìṣẹ̀dá àwọn ọmọ yóò ní gbàbọ̀dé ibi kan ní mo wà kò sí nǹkan tó fẹ́ ṣẹlẹ̀ ẹ bá bá wọn dáṣà àrú ẹ̀ o Ọlọ́run ò ní fi wá sílẹ̀ àdúrà gbogbo wa gbà gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá ní àwọn kan spiritual items tẹ́lẹ̀ lò ìbájẹ́ for protection ìbájẹ́ fún victory ìbájẹ́ fún mercy ìbájẹ́ curse breaker ẹ pè mí owó ni a ti wọ December sí àìmọye nǹkan tó máa ṣẹlẹ̀ kí December yìí tó parí wọ́n dẹ̀ ládùúrà ló gba agbára kan níwọ̀nba ìgbà tá a bá ti ṣe kiri tá a ti bá tèèyàn jẹ tá a bá ké pọ̀ lọ́wọ́ dá wa lóhùn àwọn ọkọ̀ àdúrà wọ̀nyí kẹ̀dẹ̀ ní nǹkan tá a tún lè fi máa pe Ọlọ́run ni because kò sí tẹ́ bá wẹ ọṣẹ ẹ gbàdúrà sọ́lọ́ pé Ọlọ́run o nǹkan báyìí mo fẹ́ nǹkan báyìí mo fẹ́ nǹkan báyìí mi ò fẹ́ nǹkan báyìí mi ò fẹ́ o ẹ dẹ̀ ṣe kiri ẹ wẹ ẹṣẹ yìí Ọlọ́run á dẹ̀ gbọ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ tẹ́ bá gbọ́ pé àṣẹ ti gùn òun ni tí ò ní yí padà lẹ́sẹ̀kẹsẹ̀ so gbogbo ẹ̀yin bọ́ bìbí tẹ́ bá dìdí àwọn nǹkan spiritual items ẹ jẹ́ kí n mọ̀ tó bá dẹ̀ jẹ́ yìí dádì náà lẹ bá dìde ẹ jẹ́ kí n mọ̀ iṣẹ́ mi ò ní èèwọ̀ tó orúkọ Jésù òun ni mo fi ṣe kíni ni mo fi ṣe orúkọ Jésù ni mo fi gbé kalẹ̀ mo dẹ̀ dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ ń pè mí tẹ́ ń give testimony ní agbára Ọlọ́run ogun tọ́lọ́run ti ṣẹ́ fún gbogbo yín yẹn kò ní gbé mímọ́ àpadà sí burúkú àpadà sí ìgbà kò ní jẹ́ ti tẹnikẹ́ni nínú yín mọ́ mo mọ̀ lóore pé ẹ ti ẹ̀ pè mí ẹ kò sí ẹ sọ pé Lady K ẹ dúpẹ́ fún Ọlọ́run wàláì kò sí ìdùnnú tó tó fún mi tẹ́ bá gbé owó gan fún mi inú mi lè má dùn tó yẹ nítorí pé kí ni ẹ ti ti ara mi sí Ọlọ́run ẹ ti ti ara mi yí ọba àwọn ọba so èmi bílífù pé Ọlọ́run máa wá sọ fún mi nítorí pé kí ni bí ò jẹ́ káwọn èèyàn ṣìnà bí ò jẹ́ káwọn èèyàn bọ́ sínú ìgbèkùn bí ò jẹ́ káwọn èèyàn wọnú wàhálà àti ìdààmú mo dúró gírí tí wọ́n báyìí mo dẹ̀ fi orúkọ Ọlọ́run mo fi ṣe kí ni mo fi jagun mo fi ṣẹ́gun ayé wọn fún wọn so inú Ọlọ́run wá tún dùn fún mi á sì dùn sí ẹ̀yin náà wípé ẹ̀yà abarabóore jẹ so gbogbo ẹ̀yin mọ́mì mi ẹ̀yin dádì mi ẹ jọ̀ọ́ mo bẹ̀ wá mo rọ̀ wá gbogbo ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá need àwọn spiritual items any country tẹ́ bá wà ẹ pè mí kí n tètè bá yín sẹ́ẹ̀dì ẹ̀ kẹ́ tètè wẹ ibi ọdún tuntun kẹ́ wẹ́ dànù ìdààmú kẹ́ wẹ́ dànù àṣẹ ìrí àṣẹ ìkójọ àmì burúkú kẹ́ tètè wẹ́ dànù tẹ́ bá gbé wọnú ọdún tuntun lágbára Ọlọ́run àdí ṣìṣe o lágbára Ọlọ́run àdí kọsẹ̀ o lágbára Ọlọ́run ewa yóò ní wúwá o lágbára Ọlọ́run ìjà yóò ní jà wá o lágbára Ọlọ́run ayé ò ní dọ̀ka bàjú jẹ́ sínú ayé wa so bó ṣe jẹ́ nìyẹn bá mi subscribe sínú YouTube mi kẹ́ bá mi tọ notification bell ẹ ṣeun ó dàbọ̀.